Hello and welcome to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast. I'm Matt Addison, Paul Gorst and Rich Garnett both alongside me today. None of us were on the score sheet at Anfield on Saturday, but if we'd stuck around long enough, we probably would have been. We'll be talking Bournemouth shortly as the Reds hopefully got their season up and running. We'll be looking ahead to Newcastle United as well, which should, it goes without saying, be a much sterner test on Wednesday night. Let's start though with Liverpool 9, Bournemouth 0 Gorsty. Loads of goals, Liverpool suddenly looking like the usual selves again. That's much more like it, isn't it?
It is, very much so. I was talking before the game, and it's one of those where you think, well, Liverpool certainly need the result, and a performance would be nice as well. But the way things have gone, you just think, well, even if they win 1-0 or 2-1 and they just get out of there, just get some points on the board, the first win on the board, and they can move on and kind of build from it. And then as soon as the first one goes in, Luis Diaz inside 3-4 minutes, was it? And then a second on the 6 minutes. By then, it's game over before 10 minutes, and you think, well, okay, well, that's kind of been put to rest. That the whole statistics of them falling behind 7 games in a row now over with, and Liverpool fans can relax a little bit. No chance of any kind of angst or tetchiness drifting into the stands if Bournemouth hold firm for an hour or maybe longer. So it was everything that Jurgen Klopp could have dreamt of and more, really. A record equaling Premier League win, and then maybe a little bit of a reminder to some who needed it, even ourselves. I'd be the first to put my hand up and say I've been quite kind of probably as critical as I have been for a while on this podcast in terms of the performances that they put in, but they showed that they're no busted flush by any means, and okay, it was a very substandard Bournemouth team who came to Anfield, but the thing that struck me was, even at 4s and 5s, Liverpool refused to declare, and even at 6 and 7, they still wanted more, and even at 8, they were still chasing it. It could have even been 10 had it not been for Milner's effort getting saved by the goalkeeper at the very end. So a perfect response to what had been a very poor start to the season. The hope is now Liverpool can build on it. They should be beating Bournemouth at home, no question about that. But the manner of it really should, put a bit of wind in the sails now for the what's going to be an incredibly busy September.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really important to get that first goal, wasn't it, Rich? The first one kind of felt like it was a big moment, and probably from that point, really, it was kind of the turning point, wasn't it? As soon as Liverpool got the first goal in the game, we knew that was going to be important. They got it almost straight away.
Yeah, it was certainly needed getting the first goal, wasn't it? And let's be honest, quite long overdue in terms of matches this season. But I think we're talking before the game. Where's a goal coming from Liverpool? If you had to put a bet on who would it be? And everyone I spoke to was like, well, Mo Salah, because you can't see anywhere else where a goal's coming from. It shows how your judgment can be a little bit clouded when things aren't going your way. And of course, he was the only one pretty much who didn't score. Goals all over the place. Lots of people chipping in, which is exactly what you want to see. They certainly don't want to become overly reliant on one player. And yeah, a little bit of faith restored in what Liverpool are capable of, which of course deep down we know is great things. They're a great football side. They haven't become a bad one overnight. They've had a bit of a tricky start, and when things aren't going well, I think when you look back to the United game and approaching that, and some people might have been of the view, we've drawn the first 2, but we should be able to go here and batter this poor United side. And obviously, the opposite happened. That's when you start to have a few little creaking doubts as to what's happening here. But I think that's pretty much been laid to rest. This was a dominant, relentless performance from Liverpool, and that hunger to keep going and scoring more goals was answering a question, I think. And as you say, I think the atmosphere in the ground was probably at its loudest at 9-0, with the crowd urging them to try and get that 10th and get what would have been a quite unbelievable scoreline, as if 9-0 isn't. But yeah, the world's been put back to rights. They weren't a great side, Bournemouth, let's be honest. But yeah, it was an important win, and done in pretty emphatic fashion.
Yeah, really fluent and fluid from Liverpool for the first time this season, really. I think that was probably the most important thing, as well as the goals. It just kind of felt a bit more like Liverpool again. And just so many players really to go through, Gorsty, in terms of making that happen. I suppose we should probably start with Harvey Elliott, even though he was only on the pitch for half of that game. It was an excellent 45 minutes from him. His first Premier League goal and so much more as well.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about Elliott on the day after the game, actually, and you always hear people say things like, "Oh, Elliott's going to be a player. He's going to be a top player. And he's so young, he's going to be a top player." But then there's occasionally there's a suggestion that maybe he's not quite ready at the moment for certain games and certain things, and the only way these young players fulfill potential is to play regularly and get experience in the legs. Trent Alexander-Arnold didn't come into the Liverpool team as one of the best right backs in European football, did he? The reason these players fulfill the potential is by playing. So I think games like Saturday are absolutely perfect for Harvey Elliott to continue his development, learn to kind of feel what it's like to be on in a top team, winning games regularly. So I think while the clamour is for Liverpool to strengthen the midfield areas, and I think once Thiago and Curtis Jones and Oxlade-Chamberlain and once basically when Klopp's got a full complement of midfielders, I don't think he'll be playing as regularly as he is at the moment. But how you kind of fulfill that potential is by playing, and I think sometimes that gets overlooked a little bit. People say things like, Fabio Carvalho is another example. He's going to be a player in a few years' time, and there's always this. Stefan Baccetic is a perfect example as well. Again, loads of people saying after his pre-season he's going to be a player in a few years, and you only become that player that people think you're going to be by experience, by playing in games and playing in these types of games. And he might not have learned too much, Harvey Elliott, from hammering a team 9-0, but just little things along the way, playing in teams with Firmino and Jordan Henderson, massively experienced campaigners, just little things like that. You kind of add to your game and little things that you learn. And he had a superb first half. And I thought he took his goal really well, to be fair. I think that's something he's been working on over the summer, that kind of whip finish from outside the box. I think I've seen a couple of Instagram videos of him doing just that. So it's certainly paid off for him with that finishing. Yeah, I'm excited about him. I still think he's very slight, and when he's up against the kind of big units in Premier League's midfield, sometimes he does look his age, but his quality on the ball in possession, his little passes around the corner, his first touch, it's always out of his feet, it's always forward looking. He's someone who we can certainly get excited about, but at the same time, for me, I just think you have to kind of temper that by thinking the only way he's going to fulfill his potential is by playing regularly in this team. And sometimes if it doesn't quite go to plan, then don't be writing him off because he's only 18. And I think now that there's possibly a little trend in football as well where players are kind of showing themselves to be the player that we thought a little bit older. It's not like the days of Owen and Fowler where they burst on the scene and they kind of established at that level when they're 18, 19, 20. I think now maybe when you get towards 23, 24, that's when you really start showing who you are as a player. So really impressed with Harvey Elliott, and long may it continue.
Yeah, it was really, really good to watch the first half on Saturday. And Roberto Firmino as well was another one who performed really, really well, Rich. I mean, it's probably not really going too far to say that was comfortably his best performance in maybe 18 months, 2 years. I thought he was brilliant there, and it's been a long time since that was the case.
Yeah, and I think he's another one that questions have been asked of recently, isn't he, really? He hasn't had a particularly good start to the season, but then he goes and reminds everyone that he's still got it, basically, with that level of performance. I mean, he was just everywhere, really, backing the goals. And when you look at that United game, and it's just the attacking shape, just nothing seemed to work. The players seemed to be too far away from each other, and an unusual lack of cohesion about it. It was the total opposite, and he was, front, right, and centre of it, basically, wasn't he? Deserved his goals, and he's the type of player, isn't he? When he plays with a smile on his face, Firmino, and that lifts people around him, because football should be enjoyed, shouldn't it? That's the whole point of it, basically. Whether you're a professional or just watching it, you've got to be entertained. You've got to enjoy it, and he brings that. He brings that to the party, and he'll have given Jurgen Klopp plenty to think about, because he's got another 2 games where they're going to be without Darwin Núñez, and the expectation before Bournemouth, I'm sure, would have been that as soon as Núñez is available, he goes straight back in down the middle. But Firmino's got an opportunity to do something about that, and bet against them if he did.
Yeah, the forward line looked really good, Gorst. I wanted to mention Luis Diaz as well. I mean, obviously, there's going to be comparisons with Sadio Mane. The 2 headers he scored probably are not going to sort of help in terms of that. But it really kind of feels like he's getting into a bit of a groove now. He's got the Liverpool style, but he's starting to score the goals as well to go with that.
Yeah, well, he's the top scorer now, isn't he? I think that was one of the big things for Diaz to take on this season. You know, I think we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, where last season he was getting into good, good kind of areas, and he might hit the post, or the keeper might make a really good save, or it just goes wide, and you're kind of thinking, well, when this fella's up to speed, you know, what kind of player have Liverpool got on the hands? And I think Klopp mentioned it as well. He said the only thing that's been missing is some of his shooting, some of his finishing that he had at Porto. I think he joined Liverpool at the end of January. He'd scored 16 for Porto. So he finished the season with over 20 goals, for both teams, which is a really good return. I think it was 22 overall. I think he scored 6, did he, last season for Liverpool? So he's coming off the back of that season, really, really good in front of goal. And it's something he needs to certainly, pick up a large portion, or some of the portion of the responsibility kind of vacated by Sadio Mane, who was a 20-goal a season player for Liverpool, wasn't he? 120 goals across his 6 seasons. And particularly with Darwin Núñez out as well, I wrote something the other week saying, Diaz needs to now become a regular goal scorer for Liverpool. So he's added another 2 to his haul. The thing that impressed me about those 2 goals was the manner of them. They were headers, weren't they? It's not something you associate with a kind of tricky winger who loves to run at players and try and take them on. We know he's got a really good shot on him from certain areas. He likes drifting in, doesn't he, and letting fly with that right foot. But these were kind of poacher striker finishes, a couple of good headers, and areas where Darwin Núñez perhaps would be if he wasn't still kicking his heels with that suspension. So, yeah, really good performance from Diaz as well. He's now the top scorer, and I'm sure Mo Salah will be desperate to jump ahead of him on Wednesday night against Newcastle.
Yeah, I'm sure he certainly will. You'd probably want to put a bet on him scoring on Wednesday. I think he'd be absolutely desperate to put that right, won't he? But we mentioned Harvey Elliott before. We should probably mention Fabio Carvalho as well, Rich. What did you make of his performance in the second half? I know it was probably a game state that was slightly easier for him to come into, but you can only impress with what you've got to play against, and he certainly did that. Yeah,
well, I did wonder if he'd start the match, to be honest with you. I know we just covered off Harvey Elliott. Obviously, he needed to make some sort of change from what happened against United, and in the end, obviously, he's a bit hamstrung in how many changes you can make because he's got so many injuries. But I did wonder if maybe it felt like a bit too much to have both Carvalho and Elliott in the sides at the same time, two youngsters, although obviously it might happen in the future. And I thought he might be the one that would come in for Elliott. He wasn't in the end, and obviously Elliott's justified that in the end with his first half performance. But obviously it was a pretty comfortable game for him to come in, but he looked super skillful. I was impressed with the earlier cameos he's had this season as well. I do think he's kind of knocking on the door. I don't think he's far away from starts. He looks. I think he looks. I read. I think it was Scott Parker was saying that they're both not slightly lightweight. I don't know if that's the correct term to use, really, but obviously they're still young lads, and filled out particularly. But both of them were a bit lightweight, and perhaps Carvalho slightly less so. But I think he's held his own, and I've been impressed with him. I like him, and his volley. I was right behind his volley. It was, sumptuous, caught it sweet. There's a lot of good goals in that game, of course, but just to get that at the top end, and it's same for Elliott. Obviously, it's his first Premier League goal, I think, wasn't it, in that game as well. it's just another thing ticked off, isn't it? To make you feel like you've arrived and you belong in this team around the peers that they're now rubbing shoulders with. So yeah, top marks for Carvalho. And as I say, unlucky not to start the game, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stick with you as well, Rich, for a word on Trent as well. It's not been the easiest sort of start to the season for him, but I thought he maybe looked as if he was trying a little bit hard until he scored that goal, and then suddenly just seemed to relax into the game, and that was the real Trent again.
I suppose there's been quite a bit of pressure on him, hasn't there? Because he's been in a lot of focus. Don't think he's helped by not having Joel Matip alongside him, who kind of probably. He's played a lot with him and probably trusts him to get forward and do what he does. And obviously they take the risks that they do and that they haven't always paid off so far this season. But his goal was absolutely magnificent. And yeah, he was more relaxed and it looked a bit more like his own self. I'm sure for him personally, he's got no doubt about his own ability and he probably just bats off a lot of this criticism. But I think the team as a whole came into that game under pressure, even if they were, expected to perhaps comfortably beat Bournemouth. It's the whole thing, is when things aren't going for you, what happens if you don't score in the first half hour or whatnot, and this crowd starts to get a bit on the backs or a bit anxious. It always happens, and sometimes crowds are criticised for that, but I think it's just a natural reaction, isn't it, when things aren't going your way? But that wasn't the case, was it? So, and in the end, it's a walkover. So good to see Trent looking happier and making a valuable contribution. I guess there's going to be tougher questions going to be asked in the next few weeks, but pretty sure he's up to it.
Yeah, I suppose that's the question, isn't it, Gorsty? Not just for Trent, but for the whole Liverpool team. I think it was possibly around the Community Shield that Jurgen Klopp said it might take a few games for Liverpool to get into rhythm and into their groove this season. I suppose that the question after the Bournemouth game is how confident are you that was the moment that it kind of clicks for Liverpool? Newcastle, I suppose, will come to that. That's going to be the real test of this Liverpool team.
Yeah, it has to, doesn't it? You don't win 9-0 every week. So it's got to provide some sort of overall boost, certainly for the next few weeks, I'd imagine. Wednesday night will be a different test, but I don't think Newcastle are anything special. I mean, they certainly gave Manchester City a hell of a game last Sunday, but weren't too great at Wolves yesterday. Neither the San Maximin won the goal, which 9 times out of 10 doesn't go in to rescue a point. So, yeah, Liverpool have just got to continue this on. I mean, you've got to just get back to winning ways, kind of get the first 3 weeks of the season out of the minds, and hopefully, slowly but surely, we start to see 1 or 2 return from injury. I had a little bit of a moan about that on Friday, didn't I, about the fact that Klopp always says the players are getting close, but there's still nowhere to be seen on a team sheet. So hopefully that does start to turn, but we'll obviously await the latest updates tomorrow from Jurgen, and then going forward, transfer deadline on Thursday night, isn't it? And then it's a big one on Saturday lunchtime, Merseyside derby. So yeah, I mean, as I say, you're not going to win 9-0 every week, so it must provide some sort of confidence boost to a team who could probably have used it, particularly 1 or 2 players. So yeah, all in all, a very good weekend for Liverpool. It was just probably a little bit of pang of frustration at Man City when 2 goals down against Crystal Palace and managed to turn it around. And I think that's probably a little bit of a skill that they've developed in recent months, the ability to kind of fight out of adversity, which is something they didn't necessarily have 2 years ago. So just something that makes it a little bit more difficult to challenge them in the long term. But I don't think too many will be thinking about that right now. They're just looking ahead to Wednesday night and continue on from a remarkable result, really.
Yeah, there was certainly a few people sat around me at Anfield on Saturday keeping an eye on that City result, Rich. I mean, just as a quick point, really, I noticed Andrew Beasley tweeted over the weekend that in 4 of the last 6 games in the league that City have played, they've not just gone 1 goal behind, but they've gone 2 behind, but they haven't lost any of those games. I suppose you can probably look at that in 2 ways, can't you? That can't last forever, but at the same time, as Gorsty said, it's probably a different element to Manchester City that we've not necessarily seen too many times before.
Yeah, the guy next to me took great delight in telling me it was 1-0 to Palace, and then even greater delight in telling me it's 2-0 City 2-0 down, and I thought to myself, I've been here before, haven't I? This is some sort of nightmare I remember from a few months ago. So I think I could be excused for not getting remotely enthusiastic about Manchester City being 2-0 down by all accounts, because of, you just know exactly what they're capable of, and that's why they're champions, because they never give up. They go to the end, and they've got the players to score goals. And of course, the only encouragement with that is that they are actually leaking goals, aren't they? So that gives you, that shows that they're not impenetrable. I've called them boring in the past. They can't really level them that at the moment, whilst they're conceding goals as well as scoring them. So yeah, I'll have to park that one for a bit, I think. But it's, it would obviously, you want to try and gain ground on Manchester City at any opportunity. But if you give them a 5-point lead or whatever it was, you can't expect to claw that back too quickly, can you? It might take a little bit of a while to do that. But Liverpool can only worry about their own business, can't they? They already know they can't control Manchester City in the same way that Manchester City can't control Liverpool. So I think this is probably the most boring cliche thing you could possibly say in football, but they won that game 9-0. But I'm sure the first thing you would have been satisfied with is the clean sheet, because you can't win football games consistently unless you're keeping clean sheets, and that was a bit overdue, and that's what he's got, and he needs to build on that now and be defensively solid. And whilst people like Nunez and still to an extent Diaz are settling in at the other end of the pitch, you're giving them a platform to build on. But if you can follow that up with another clean sheet against Newcastle on Wednesday, then I'll be pretty happy.
Yeah, just before we move on to Newcastle, Gorst, a quick word on the transfer deadline. Obviously, that's on Thursday. Liverpool, probably in most people's eyes, still looking possibly one short, at least in terms of numbers in midfield and possibly in the attack too. I mean, what's the sort of latest on that situation? I suppose the question is it any more likely that Liverpool sign someone now compared to what it was a week or so ago?
I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, Matt, I've been off over the bank holidays, so there's nothing major in terms of updates. It was just interesting listening to Klopp in his Friday press conference when he said, you were right and I was wrong, talking to the press. And he said, now we go for the midfielder. Some people took that as kind of a nailed-on admission that they are looking. But to be honest, I don't think they've ever stopped looking, in all honesty. I think the issue is in terms of why they might not get a player in is, you bring in a player for standard player now who's going to be capable of doing a decent job for Liverpool is at the very least 30, 35, 40 million. So they bring in a player for that on a 5-year contract, and then within 6 weeks, Thiago's back and Oxlade-Chamberlain's back and Curtis Jones is back, and if this player isn't top quality, he's probably going to be, catered as well. He's probably going to be 6th or 7th or maybe even 8th choice midfield, and Liverpool have just forked out quite a big sum for him. I think that is a bigger issue than some people think. I've seen some tweets, people saying, at this point I'd just take anyone, but you wouldn't, would you? Because okay, let's get in a lad from League Two then. He's going to play midfield for Liverpool next week. Within 25 minutes, there'd be an outrage, wouldn't there? Why have they brought this fella in? So, Klopp's always professed the right player, and, he certainly means that. Now, do I think there's more than one or two players capable of playing for Liverpool in midfield? I do. It's whether the main man himself thinks that, isn't it? But I think they're always looking, really. But I think this kind of, now we go for the midfielder line, it's just got people really excited that something can be done. I think they have to be looking, because if they're not looking, they're not doing the jobs, essentially, are they? Because you're always looking for improvements, and certainly at a time when, 3 of those 4 players who were injured in midfield have never proven themselves as kind of durable who can last the course of a season and play every week. So it's going to be an interesting end of the week, and I'm still of the belief as well that they need someone up top, someone who can play in the wide areas and maybe even down the middle, because there's no natural backups for Diaz and certainly Mo Salah. You know, you're looking at Harvey Elliott there, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Diogo Jota. None of them are natural wide players for me. Jota obviously played on the left for Wolves, but I think since he's come to Liverpool, he's proven himself as a much more, fox in the box. Elliott's kind of making his name in senior football as a midfielder now, and Oxlade-Chamberlain would much prefer to play centre with himself. So if you're asking me, they probably need two before the end of the window. But, as I say, the pool of players capable of being a real hit at Liverpool is smaller than it is at other clubs, which is why Nottingham Forest can sign 20 players and Liverpool probably can't. But, it's going to be an interesting few days in the market. So certainly the number of rumours are going to be ramped up, and Liverpool fans will be across the Echoes pages. We hope to keep up to date with all the latest happenings.
Yeah, absolutely. All the eyes were drawn to that. Now we go for a midfielder, but like you say, the thing that he said immediately after that was it still has to be the right player. It's not just going to be everyone. So yes, we shall see what happens. I'm sure, like you say, there'll be plenty of players linked with Liverpool as well. But let's go on to Newcastle now then, Rich. What have you made of them this season? We mentioned the game against Manchester City the other week. They looked pretty good in that, but what do you reckon? Liverpool should surely have far too much for them if they play anything like their usual selves as they did at the weekend.
Well, I watched Newcastle against City and I thought they were absolutely fantastic. And I thought that game itself was one of the best games I've seen so far in the Premier League in the early part of this season. And then I turned them off against Wolves yesterday because it was that boring. And as a result of that, I did actually miss Alan St-Maximin's incredible volley near the end, and what a finish that is. So I think that kind of tells you the story, really. I think at this moment in time, they're a growing side, aren't they? Newcastle, I still think that in terms of against the someone like Liverpool, they would still be considered a pretty average side. But they do have players in the team that can score goals out of nothing. And sometimes, if Liverpool have got any sort of vulnerability, it might be that's where teams can unpick them. So when you look at that Zaha goal for Palace at Anfield, brilliant. Only two sort of players involved in it, really. There was Eze, I think he played the ball into him. Absolutely superb ball, just threaded it through and a fantastic finish. And sometimes that's all it takes. If you've got someone with star quality, because I blow hot and cold on St-Maximin. I think he's very entertaining and very skillful, but somewhat cynically after. Sometimes I think he doesn't know what he's doing. He might argue that if he saw me play, to be fair. But although if he saw my Echo 6-a-side debut, he would probably be trying to get me to St James Park. But,
goal with your first touch, wasn't it, Rich?
Goal with first touch, that's correct, Matt. That's an exclusive here on the Blood Red podcast. Although I can tell you that I did stop at one point panting for breath and check my watch, and we'd only played 20 minutes. So a lesson there for playing in a cage where the ball doesn't go out of play. But getting away from me, he's definitely an entertainer. So Maximin, he's someone dangerous, and I'm sure they've got other players. Callum Wilson's got pace as well, hasn't he? And, they won't be without a threat to Liverpool. But if Liverpool can get on top of them at early doors, and as you say, getting another early goal like they did against Bournemouth, then I would like to think it would then be a comfortable victory for Liverpool.
Yeah, we mentioned the fact, Gorsty, that this has got to be kind of the turning point. Liverpool have got to build on what they did on Saturday, and I think probably it's the same for Trent as well, isn't it? There has been one or two questions over his defensive contributions so far this season, and St-Maximin, as Rich says, is probably the player that Newcastle had looked to try and employ that game plan again against Liverpool. But I suppose this is the chance really to prove that the first couple of games were the one-off. This can be the true Liverpool against that kind of team.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to need help against St-Maximin, because I think every right back in world football probably needs help against him, because he's so unpredictable, so skillful, and so naturally talented. If he has if he's at it like he was against City last week, then he could cause Liverpool plenty of problems. He gave Kyle Walker an absolute torrid time in that game, and funny how it wasn't highlighted anywhere near as much as had it been a certain Trent Alexander-Arnold. But those are the kind of things that Liverpool's right back has to deal with, I guess. And I've banged my head against that wall enough times to not argue that again today. But yeah, it's part and parcel of how Liverpool's midfield works, isn't it? Particularly with the reliance on the fullbacks from wide areas in an attacking sense. Those midfielders have to cover the slack. It's normally Jordan Henderson, isn't it, in that right channel? It has been Harvey Elliott at times, and whoever it is going to have to put in a shift and help out Alexander-Arnold on their Wednesday night. But I think Liverpool can't be too concerned with what Newcastle are going to be able to do on the ball, in possession and whatever else, because Liverpool will look to dominate it at Anfield and take maximum points. I think in that game was it December? I think Liverpool had quite a few kind of COVID issues at the time, but still, went a goal down, but still managed to comfortably win it in the end. And as I say, Newcastle were very good against City last week at home, not so much yesterday away from home against Wolves, and Molineu's a much different place to go to Anfield when Liverpool's tails are up. So yeah, Liverpool just, as I say, just got to continue in the same vein as they did against Bournemouth. And okay, you might not be beating Newcastle 9-0 on Wednesday night, but you still massively back them to turn it on again and come away with the points. And just before we can even kind of look at City's results with any kind of seriousness, I think Liverpool have just got to put together a good run now. And you're looking at it now, and it could be, a 6 or 7 game winning streak. It could be winning 8 of the next 10, whatever it may be. Just need to put together a strong run now before we can look ahead to the World Cup in November.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that in mind, let's move on and pick our teams for the game. Then it'll be Alisson Becker in goal. Gorst, I'll come to you for the defence. I mean, is there any sort of opportunity to change things around much, do you think, or is it just going to be the same again?
No, I imagine it'll be the same again. I think this period now where Liverpool start playing twice a week is when we will see more rotation. If the squad allows it, Klopp hasn't got too much scope for that at the moment, as he certainly with the centre-back options. It's going to be Gomez and Van Dijk again. I imagine Robertson will continue again. And then over the next few weeks, you might see 1 or 2 changes. But for now, I'm still imagine it'll be much the same team as it was Saturday. Of course, Klopp will give us an update, won't he, on the injury front on Tuesday. I imagine he'll just say player A, B, C, D, E, F, and G are all close, but not too many on the comeback trail just yet. But yeah, I imagine Robertson will start ahead of Tsimikas, which is what your thinly veiled question was getting at, wasn't it?
As always. I mean, he did do that, didn't he? That was the sub, I think, on around sort of 68, 69 minutes at the weekend. So that's possibly the way that you manage Andy Robertson, isn't it? Rich, is your defence the same as ours? Is it going to stick the same? And if it is, you might as well talk us through your midfield.
Yeah, same defence. Well, they're the first one to keep a clean sheet, so it would be a bit harsh to change it, wouldn't it? But just on the point about Tsimikas, I know that obviously there's been some questions asked because he's coming on all the time, but I'm actually quite happy to see him getting on because I think he's a good player, and he gives you another option. And certainly later in the game, he's capable of sticking a decent ball in. So all power to him. But yeah, same back four. In terms of midfield, I just wonder. I know Elliot came off at half time, and I know Klopp said he should be fine. You know what I mean? I just wonder whether he would switch it and put Carvalho in, but probably not. Thinking out loud here. But just in the interests of being a bit different, I'll say he'll bring in Carvalho for Elliot, but he'll stick with Firmino and Henderson.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the same sort of team, but you kind of referenced it a little bit before, Gorsty, in terms of whoever's on the right of that midfield is going to have to help out with Trent. I mean, does that come into your thinking? Is there maybe an argument to have Carvalho in, but on the left and move Henderson back to the right? Or is it just a case of Elliott's done well, so probably stick with him? Yeah,
well, he got brought off for half time, didn't he? So we're not too sure what the situation was there. I don't think he got asked about it in his post-match. I'm not too sure.
I think he felt something. I think like a niggle, but he said I think it's all right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the opportunity to use the 5 subs and the fact that they win 5-0 probably means you would err on the side of caution more often than not in that situation. But on the other hand, Liverpool have just been absolutely tormented with injuries already. So you wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if that's Elliot for X number of weeks. I mean, hopefully not. But as I say, it wouldn't be a major shock with it. But if everything is as it is and he's fine, I think he's probably earned the opportunity for another start. But the problem is he operates best on that right, doesn't he? The right of the midfield three, which I think where Henderson normally would be looking to play and help out Trent, as I say, against San Maximum. So that's a tricky one to go for really for Klopp. I think I'm going to go with Elliot, and then Henderson on the left and Firmino, holding things together in the middle.
And in terms of the forward line, then Gorst, I'll come back to you. It's just got to be the same again, hasn't it? I suppose this is, we mentioned the test for Liverpool in terms of turning a corner. It's probably a test for Roberto Firmino as well. Back-to-back performances like he did on Saturday. That would be a big thing for him and for the Reds as well.
Yeah, he was superb on Saturday, wasn't he? But I don't think we can take too much from that in terms of him putting aside his early season struggles, because I thought he was really, really poor at Fulham. Don't know what he was doing at Manchester United for most of the game, playing kind of holding midfield for most of the game, wasn't he? We know that's how he kind of plays as this false nine, but I was shocked to find that was his first goal at Anfield since December 2020 in the first half. I think it was the header against Tottenham in that game mid-December. So yeah, it's going to be a big one to see whether we get a Firmino more like Saturday or a Firmino more like Fulham on Wednesday night. Hopefully it's given him a huge boost of confidence and we start to see the kind of old Firmino that we're used to with the swagger and the style and just knitting it all together. But it's going to have to be Firmino, isn't it? I mean, you wouldn't drop him anyway after that performance on Saturday, but Klopp's got no other option anyway. So Darwin Núñez can kick his heels once again on the sidelines and just realise what he's missed if Liverpool add to this 9-goal haul of Saturday. He could have been on the end of a few of those himself, couldn't he? So, yeah, Firmino, hopefully this is a Firmino about to enter some form. Luis Diaz on the left and Mohamed Salah on the right.
Yeah, he pops up near the goal-rich Roberto Firmino and suddenly finds himself scoring. Who would have thought it? Is it got to be him again for you as well through the middle?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it's the same front three. He can't really do much else, can he, at the moment? I don't think. I said at the start of the pod, I think I said Firmino had 2 games left to ask the question before Darwin Núñez comes in. That's not true. He's got 1 left, hasn't he? Already had 2. I think I'd conveniently forgotten about the United performance. But yeah, so with that, there's an incentive for Roberto Firmino, isn't there? So as Gorsty said, will we get the Bournemouth version or the Fulham version? Well, if he wants to really ask a difficult question of the manager, then it'll have to be the Bournemouth version. Otherwise, Núñez is just going to come straight back in, isn't he? So something to aim for. And yeah, there's no shortage of familiarity between that front three. So hopefully they can go out and do the business again.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go for our match predictions then. I think I'll go 3-1 to Liverpool. I fancy Mohamed Salah will score at least 1 after not doing so against Bournemouth. But I think it goes without saying, Gorsty, it's going to be a lot more tricky than it was for Liverpool on Saturday. How do you reckon it might play out?
Well, certainly not going to be 9-0, but yeah, I agree with you. Actually, 3-1 seems to be a decent scoreline. Let's just hope they don't fall behind first and they've got to, come back. So that'll be the 8th game in the last 9 Premier League games. But yeah, loads of positive things to take from Saturday. So yeah, I think Liverpool have just got to put together a quiet little steady run now and get themselves back, a lot higher up the table where they used to be in.
Same for you, Rich. A win for Liverpool again.
To be honest, I was thinking 3-1, but now you've both said that, I feel like there's a requirement for me to be different. They need more, as I said, they need more clean sheets. That needs to be the basis of any decent league campaign, I think. So with that in mind, I'll go for 3-0.
Excellent stuff. Well, that's all we've got time for here on this edition of the show, but we'll have Jurgen Klopp's press conference for you on Tuesday and then coverage around the game as usual on Wednesday. Thursday is transfer deadline day, Blood Red on Friday, and then the Merseyside derby on Saturday. Until next time, though, from all of us here, it's goodbye for now.